So the debate about AI and the productivity improvements for business continues to rage. On the side of the doubters, people think it's overstated. On the boosters' side, many believe it's just poor execution and unrealistic goals that are the problem. On today's episode, we're talking to Thrive's Chief Technology Officer, Michael Gray, to get his take on patterns and anti-patterns for success in enterprise AI projects. Welcome to another episode of the AI Forecast, proudly sponsored by Cloudera. I'm your host, Paul Muller. Join me along with leading companies and industry experts every single week as we explore the past, the present, and the future of data and AI in the enterprise. And welcome to the podcast, Michael.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
It's great to have you. Where do we find you? Where in the world do we find you today?
I am just north of Boston, Massachusetts, in the New England.
Beantown. Long-time resident, born and bred?
I'm originally from New Hampshire, but I've been in Massachusetts longer than I was ever in New Hampshire, so I guess I'm from Massachusetts at this point.
I love that. Well, let's get into the podcast. Before we jump into the topic of, I suppose, how to get the most out of your AI project and your learnings there, we do a little thing called the lightning round that we put, or the Fast Four, the Furious Four, call it what you will. Sounds like a Hollywood movie, doesn't it? We do our lightning round at the start of the podcast. Are you ready to do it?
I'm excited.
I'm nervous now. I feel like I've got to live up to some great expectation. All right, first question. What would people who know you best, friends, family, colleagues, enemies even, would say is your superpower?
I move really fast, maybe sometimes too fast, but I look at it as a superpower. I like to move fast. I like to make decisions quickly. I like to fail fast.
I like this. We did a podcast on the topic of failing fast. Teresa Payton, check it out, everyone. Next question. The most impactful technology of all time?
Artificial intelligence.
Oh, you were paid to say that.
That was a layup.
All right. It was. To be fair, it was. All right. Well, with that, you mentioned you introduced AI into evidence. We talk about AI automating stuff for business. I don't care about business. I want to talk about you, Michael. What do you want to see AI automate for you?
I would tell you that the thing that I want to see is automate the education system and make it easier for younger people to learn new things. And I think right now that they're underserved. The education space is underserved for elementary age. There's so much that could be brought to that generation, and we got to do it safely. But that's where I would like to see the most advancement.
Noble cause. I think it's great. I'm right there with you. If you figure out how to do it, you've got my backing. All right. Last but not least, you're somebody who moves fast. You need data. What are some of the best practices you've learned as someone who works with data every day?
The biggest thing is taking a moment and structuring it. Now, AI can help us restructure data or make sense of unstructured data. But if you can have a true commitment to your data architecture, you can move very, very quickly. So it's a little bit of slow down to speed up. And when I say slow down, make sure those structures are built correctly, and you can move much faster on everything else.
Yeah, it's been a recurring topic on the show, and it's one that I think people can sometimes gloss over with all the sense of urgency to do something. Is, maybe you got to go slow to go fast, as you say.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right, let's talk about AI. You're in the services business, so and you're a CTO, so it's almost as though not only when you're dealing with your clients, I guess you're having to give them recommendations about how they should be doing things, but you're probably also thinking in the back of your mind, hey, this advice is something I'm going to have to follow myself tomorrow because I've got to do this stuff. So I guess the question is, what's the biggest disconnect between how AI is being talked about and what's actually happening in the world of I guess both your clients and yourself? What are you seeing?
So obviously, when any technology revolution comes along like this, the other piece that comes along with it is hype, right? And we've got to get past all the hype. That's rather obvious. But what I would tell you that we've experienced is adoption of the humans at all levels in an organization makes a sizable difference. If you've got a company and then a very small percentage of the employees there truly understand the power of AI, you're not really gonna, specialized organizations, sure, but it's really hard to move the needle. I would say you need to get up over 50%, maybe even up over 70% of AI adoption to really start making some progress. And the other piece of that, which I tell people a lot, is this amazing piece of technology You still need the humans to make it go. Eventually, there's different areas where you can eliminate the human. But right now, the phase we're in, we need to be helping those humans trust this technology, get used to it, learn it, educate them on how it works, and then you can make real progress.
My analogy that I've been using recently is it's like you've just hired 1,000 of the world's best read, most widely read graduate students. And if you've ever hired a graduate student, and no disrespect to them, but they come with a lot of needs, it can be as distracting to have them helping you, quote unquote, in the office as it is not, right? Like, you need to spend a lot of time supervising that kind of.
We call it the most patient intern you've ever met.
With
right?
all the good and bad that comes with an intern, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, they're going to come right back to the door and say, well, wait, did you want me to when you said send it soon, did you mean right now or tomorrow? They do need you to be specific, right? And then don't be surprised when the intern comes back and is asking you more questions. That's how it works.
Yeah, I haven't actually done the test of asking ChatGPT to get me a left-handed screwdriver yet, but I might try that.
Yeah, well, I've certainly had plenty of times where it deleted a project and I said, what are you doing? And then it started crafting an apology to me. Well, I don't want the apology. I want you to undo what you just did.
Yeah, so slightly terrifying. No, your point's well made. So the people part of it's important. In terms of, maybe we'll talk about adoption in just a minute, actually, because I've got a whole bunch of questions about it. But maybe everyone loves a war story. So maybe let's talk about war stories. Have you seen cases where AI not only has not lived up to its hype, but potentially has made things worse, or it's introduced anti-patterns to the company that went against the objectives? What happens when AI projects go wrong?
What I see over and over again is people who are, organizations who are very proud of the tools they put in, very advanced tools that have provided no value to their business whatsoever, and in some cases have affected their gross margins from anywhere from 2 to 10%. So you bought all these
negative.
Tools. Yeah, in the negative. So you bought all these tools and you put them in and you're actually making less money. So, just sort of getting lost in how exciting the technology was and almost, you're building a better mousetrap. You didn't necessarily have to do that.
Are there some examples of areas where you've sort of seen it? I want to know more about that.
Yeah, well, I'll give you a really good example. Perhaps there's someone in an advisory role who is attempting to craft a report or a PowerPoint. We've seen this a lot, so that that PowerPoint can now be delivered to the customer without that advisory service coming alongside. And so you've eliminated the human, but the thing is, the customer found value in the human conversation. Mm-hmm. Right? So you automated all the technology, but that wasn't the value that the customer saw. And so it was what we've sort of learned now is a lot of these, when you can save a lot of time, let's just say for a moment, a PowerPoint takes you 2 hours to create by hand, but with AI takes 15 minutes. Well, after a while, you don't have those 2 hours, but you have the 15 minutes. So what we're now seeing is as you tried to eliminate humans, you had the reverse effect because the quality dropped right through the floor. But if you keep the human right there alongside it, you can scale up your business. You can provide better and more value to your customer by matching the AI with the human at the same time. And I think probably too many people have focused in on let's eliminate these humans and let's eliminate that job when that wasn't maybe the right course of action. And so, then they ask like, well, how am I going to recoup money or something like that? Maybe it's not recouping money. It's about providing better value, maybe charging more for your services as opposed to just trying to save on costs. And I've seen that time and time again.
Yeah, I think that's a really great observation. It's a bit like saying that ATMs are there to get rid of bank tellers. No, they're there to enable the bank teller to sell a more sophisticated product and stop doing boring, repetitive work. You don't take the people out. You do more of the thing you do at a higher quality and higher margin, to your point. Yeah. I think that's really, really well said. But I suppose, in business, being a business person myself, it really is so tempting to reach for that lever of, wow, I can do a huge cost takeout.
Right. Well, and a lot of people will measure the performance of their AI project. They'll say, well, we saved 3,000 hours. That 3,000 hours had a dollar value of $100,000. look at this, we just saved $100,000. You didn't really save the $100,000. You didn't lay off 5 people. They probably didn't have time to do that work before. You improved quality, and you scaled your business a little bit. That wasn't some giant cost savings.
So you've got a sort of philosophy / methodology, if I understand correctly, that you guys call crawl, walk, run.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure you've never heard it before, right?
Yeah. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, so that was really sort of a look in the mirror. I think last year there's a lot of service providers, and probably ourselves included, of we wanted to jump right to the most advanced use case and transform the business operation of every customer we had. Very lofty goal. And look at how amazing this is. What we learned is that even the most advanced AI prompt engineer, whatever you want to refer to the technologist as, they had to take a step back because you're talking way over your customer's head, right? They don't know what an MCP server is. They don't understand why to use an agent. They barely understand prompting and models and context windows and everything else. And so crawl, walk, run, when we sort of got there, we said, well, we know from previous technology transformations, cybersecurity in 2015 is a world away from where we are with cybersecurity today. It took some education, right? And it took, let's talk about where you are on your journey before we talk about how we can help you. And so crawl, walk, run, obviously everybody's heard it. It really resonated. There were a lot of organizations that felt that they needed some basic education. They needed some basic skills. AI was not something that was really in their vocabulary as an organization. So with Crawl, Walk, Run, right at the outset, we ask our customers, where are you? Whether you bought a bunch of technology, you bought subscriptions to OpenAI, Enterprise, you bought Copilots, where are you? What we found is that a lot of people bought a bunch of technology with no rollout plan. And that we've seen this before. I mean, AI is extremely powerful. It's changing things. But we knew this, right? We had to train people not to click on malicious emails 10 years ago. And it took a little while to teach people. And now, hopefully it's mostly understood and we have controls and technology to help us. And I think in some ways AI is no different than those other technology revolutions. I was joking with somebody yesterday, remember when not everybody had email? And at that first step, there were some people going, I don't use email, so I don't need an account, thank you, to their manager. Well, that didn't last. Eventually, we figured out this is significantly more efficient. So we really want to preach, and our service, while it does include technology, the biggest benefit that I believe it provides to the customers, there are human beings from our side that are going to help your human beings adopt this technology. And really, that's what technology service providers, that's why they exist. Because if it was easy to put this technology in and you didn't need any help, you wouldn't need technology service providers. And we know there's plenty of those out there, right? There is a place here. And so that was the big lesson I think we learned after everything changed with cybersecurity is you need a CISO, you need a security analyst, you need someone guiding the customers through how to leverage this technology, not just here's a login, you'll be all set. And the response from the customers has just been amazing. And we think it's a real differentiator for us that the human being, the advisory side of the service is included with what we do.
And you were sort of somewhat dismissive of the cliche of the metaphor of crawl, walk, run. But for someone who's a self-avowed move faster, a sprinter, I appreciate the discipline that's required to say, look, to your point, let's click accept terms and conditions, deploy, versus saying, well, let's talk about organizational change management. Let's talk about the fact that 1,000 very patient interns, or graduates as we'd call them in Australia, are about to start. How do you work with that? To your point, getting through some of the language, because I do think there is a lot of I'd almost call it AI karaoke, is people kind of are singing along with the words, but they're not entirely sure what's going on. They're certainly not in tune, and it's nothing like the original. Yeah.
I've sat with a couple executives and had one-on-one. Let's have 2 hours, and I'm going to really talk to you about AI. And I walk into the conference room, and they spin their laptop around. Okay, where do I go? And my reaction is, hold on, we're not touching your laptop. And I've experimented with this a little bit, and it really does work. I go to the whiteboard. And this is one-on-one time. So, where I first start with is I draw a box and let's talk about what a context window is. Say, if you really want to learn this, I need to teach you some concepts, not just bring you to a website and let's start typing, right? Let's talk about the structure of a good prompt. Let's talk about input, output. And by the way, it's not a college level PhD. It's just at a high level, let's talk about how we accomplish these goals and how we use this technology. And I will tell you, ever since I started going to the whiteboard, it seems to be a much better experience for everybody involved. And, let's say the last half hour using the technology, it's actually a little more fun, right? Oh, now I get it. Now I understand why this intern can't answer my question.
We obviously, I think the focus for most folks, because it is so widespread, I mean, it's become in the same way that to Google has become a verb. Kleenex means, tissue. ChatGPT has largely become synonymous with this idea of prompting and generative textual generation, textual content, but also, richer content. When you talk about use cases, how many of them focus on the sort of the generative side of things versus AI being applied in other use cases, whether it's agentic or maybe more subtle, non-interactive elements of deployment? Where do you see where's the actual value versus the interest and the experience?
I'm going to come around the bend on your question. By the way, at my house, we say, "Did anybody ask Claude?" As if he's a person. Now, but to answer your question, here's the real transformative thing that we found amongst our team is, why are you waiting to get to that decision point of, do I need an agent? Do I need a skill, agentic? You have a problem or an opportunity or a challenge inside your company. Okay. Forget about the solution for a moment. Get all of the context of that problem into some sort of AI memory, an MD file, whatever you want to put it in, and start working the problem as a team with AI. And then ask that same prompt that knows everything that you know now. We put the transcript from the meeting. We put the Excel doc that has the list of customers. Whatever artifacts you have, fill it in there. And then ask the AI, knowing everything you know, what kind of tools would you use to solve this problem? And then just keep prompting. And I will tell you, it works, because there's a lot of people that want to use the word agentic. You're talking about the karaoke, and you're saying, like, why are you so obsessed with this word? Don't you want to just meet the opportunity? Don't you want to solve the challenge? Right. But again, and I challenge us internally. We say we are an AI first company. I challenge everybody internally. You've brought a problem to me. Forget about the technologists and the code we're going to write. Did you take all the things you knew about this problem and put it into a model and summarize it down for me? Because you don't need me for that. Anybody can do that. I will tell you honestly, that really works. If there's a piece of advice, is go have 3 meetings about what the problem is. Just talk about it. Take those 3 transcriptions, put it into any kind of AI tool, and ask it, what do you think we should do? You are going to get some very decent suggestions, and they're going to be well-founded, because a lot of times the people do have the answer. They just don't really know how to execute it with technology. And frankly, these AI tools are pretty good at suggesting these things. Now, to answer I said it's going to come all the way around the bend.
No, that was good.
I do think, that's very much a very basic LLM. I want you to summarize some transcripts and find the pattern. That's easy stuff. What we are finding is, the more you can combine these AI-based project transcripts together, you find really good opportunities for agents, because you've now widened your context window, and now you're actually talking about how your company works. Okay. And when you have that widened context window and you have memories and MD files, however you're doing this, now agents start to sort of float to the surface. I see your employees are often discussing they have difficulty getting customer satisfaction. It comes up in all of your meetings. I think you need to build an agent around customer satisfaction. Because I think the problem that's happening with AI is I'm starting with, I want to build an agent, not I have this problem.
Yeah.
Right. And I did the same thing. Claude the other day said, well, you already have an agent for this. And I was like, I do? And it was just referring to a chat I had the other day. It was like really eye-opening. Like, we're very quick to want to place a label on something as opposed to just solve a problem.
Yeah, I'm with you. And you know, there isn't, speaking of cliches, there's another cliche for that, right? Which is when all you've got is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yes, absolutely.
And we just start running around going, you know, I've got this thing, let me go try and find problems for it, versus I've got a problem, let me find a solution for it. Is there a risk as we look at these things, and I want to talk about adoption in just a second, but is there a risk as we start to look at these technologies that companies run the risk of losing their differentiation? But I guess by picking up the same magazine, getting the same basic advice, and reaching for the same set of tools and applying them to exactly the same problems, they've got no competitive differentiation. And I suppose the flip side is this sense of urgency is partly because, well, if the other guys get there first, their margins are going to be better. They'll be able to lower their prices and I'll be out of business in 90 days.
I think there's a relatively simple answer the way I would look at this, which is forget about technology and AI for a moment. What makes your company special? How are you different? Answer that question and then ask yourself the follow-up question is, can AI help me enhance that differentiation? Can AI help me be more efficient at that differentiation? This is how we start to get the ideas flowing, right? Well, what we're really different is our advisory team is just special. They're really great. We just have tremendous people. The problem is there's only 24 hours in a day. And going back to that early example, great. How can we give those people more time back? Not eliminate them. How can we give those people more time back? And then build an agent that builds PowerPoints on the fly with those people influencing how that agent works. Okay, now you've got something. Now you've got a real use case. And again, because you're trying to think more about your business as opposed to let me throw some technology at the problem.
Yeah. And I want to remind everyone who's listening who might have just tuned in late, I'm talking to a chief technology officer and he keeps on trying to not talk about technology. It's brilliant. We're talking about business and differentiation, which I think is exactly the right conversation to have, by the way. I didn't mean that with any sarcasm or shade.
I took it as a compliment, so don't worry.
Brilliant. So let's talk about, we've agreed to get started. So I've been with you at the whiteboard. You've walked me through some of the concepts. I'm feeling a bit more attuned to it. We've started an organizational change management program. We've introduced teams to it. Do we start piloting or do we encourage people to have a play first so that they get used to some of these ideas in practice?
I think it's option 3, which is champions, champions, champions.
Okay.
We have seen it over and over again, internally and externally. I don't care where you are on the org chart. Find champions and use them to the best of your ability. Spend time with those champions. Enable them to be successful. Enable them to tell their coworker, look what I did. If it's just the tech people pushing things down to everybody, like in an ivory tower setting, it's not really going to work. And, you know, it probably isn't going to be the champion you pick. They often select themselves. They're saying to you, I think we could do more. And maybe they know a little bit more about AI than their manager. That's okay. And you have to embrace it. We had somebody internally on our team some time ago said, I will go sit with every one of my peers. And if they need help learning the technology, I'll teach them that. If they're concerned about their jobs, I'll talk to them about that. If they're embarrassed to say they don't know how any of this works, I'll talk to them about that. And sat for an hour with every single person on the team, and it made a massive difference in the adoption and the trust in the technology, because in a one-on-one setting, they were able to acknowledge vulnerabilities that they had in their thinking about AI. And, you know, you get to see some really interesting things. People that you never thought could contribute all of a sudden are adding maybe 2 and 3 times their previous capacity because you enabled them to use this powerful piece of technology.
Again, organizational change management 101, right? Like there's emergent change agents, people who want to champion things. That's sounding very familiar, as you say, to the cybersecurity introduction back a decade ago. So as we're talking about introducing this technology, we're sort of post-pilot phase, or in the middle of the pilot phase. The big question that the board will be asking, the people spending the money will be asking is this working? Are we there yet? Right? The definition of success is really ultimately a question of, well, what are we measuring? What should people be measuring during those early parts of the rollout?
So first and foremost is usage. It seems so simple. Are they logging in and using that thing? How many tokens are they using? And by the way, if someone's not leveraging the technology, it's not let's let them go. It's let's go sit them with a champion and let's find out why they're not using it. And by the way, that's sort of the baseline and the crawl of let's get everybody logging in every day, using it as part of their job. Maybe it's 10% of their day. That's actually great news. From there, then we start to think about, can we see departmental agents? Can we have line of sight to a departmental agent? One mistake I see people make is they give everybody in department this very advanced tooling, and they all make 17 agents that do the exact same thing. And maybe there's a good one and a bad one. Well, the thing is, you need to cultivate how those agents get built and roll them out the same way you would a software product. So what we do is we don't actually let people build their agents, but we don't let them share. This is internally. When it's time to share your agent, you think you got something that is really great, then it goes to a manager in a department. And we track that we have released this agent right here. And when somebody new starts in 2 weeks, as part of their training, hey, we have an agent for you to do this part of your job. So first track the humans, then track the agents, and then track the workflows. And very simple statistics. How many times did that workflow run this week? The advice I also give to our team is if somebody tells you, I have all these very advanced pieces of technology and I bought every subscription, ask them for their usage statistics. Because I think it's an evolution that probably any organization goes through where they get the technology out there and then they say, I have no idea who's actually using this.
I mean, let's be honest, that's been the case for 60 years, but it's just a question now of, to your point, it's with the ability to vibe code a solution being available to everyone. I've got this at the moment. I literally had to send a memo out to everyone within one of my teams yesterday just saying, guys, I really want you to innovate. If it touches your workspace, do what you want. Right. Go hog wild. The minute the Venn diagram of what you're doing intersects with somebody else's Venn diagram, like there's an overlap with another person, another workflow, stop.
Right.
And talk to the coordinating agent, whether that's your manager, the board, whoever it needs to be. But because, at some point in time, we can't all change the way everyone else is working to suit us because we're going to get to chaos real quickly.
How about vibe code a usage dashboard? Why don't you start there, right?
And I think that's such a great point because one of the other challenges that I'm having personally at the moment is people coming up with really great ideas, but to your point, adoption is the critical factor. And then, of course, every child is special. My child's more special than everyone else's, right? We've all been there. The thing I've created is really important. And then people get a lot of emotional attachment to their little solution, their little agent or whatever it might be. And then you have to have a tough conversation that says, well, we can't use everyone's idea. We've got to pick an idea and move it forward and then iterate from there. And I hadn't actually stopped to think, of a really simple policy is as you build your whatever, make sure it's got telemetry data that tells us how often it's being used.
And it's not hard to add. And you sort of mentioned this earlier, but I do want to touch on it. Sooner or later, your board of directors asks, well, now that you have all this technology, where's my half a point of EBITDA, right? Mm-hmm. Where's my gross margin improvement? Oh, we didn't actually improve anything. We just put all this technology out there. Right. And so I've seen that time and time again. And I've explained that actually to our employees. I do agree. This is very cool. Where is the benefit to the company other than it being cool and you can tell people about it? And they really have to look in the mirror and go, geez, I guess you're right. I never really looked at it that way, which goes back to the business outcome problem.
Yeah. And it's a difficult one because I guess you could argue, there's a whole podcast in this topic, right? Which is, famously, what was it, 30 years ago, the quote was, the the IT productivity improvement numbers are everywhere except in GDP data, right?
Right.
And you do wonder with AI whether it's going to be just an exponential version of that, which is, yeah, sure, everyone's more productive, but it's just not showing up in the data.
To talk a little bit of technology, and you talk about people wanting to build agents. Imagine you show up on your first day and your manager says, "Let me walk through the 37 agents that you use to do your job."
Yeah.
Okay, I can't do that. One of the things we've really found internally is you don't need an agent, you need an orchestrator, so you don't need to know what agent does what, right? That orchestration level is very hard, but also really meaningful, because at that point, the employee doesn't know if there's 37 agents, 200 agents, or two. They're just getting their job done, because the orchestration layer is where the real key is on leveraging agentic workflows. There's plenty of orchestration layers out there. I think mobilizing them is really, really hard.
The other problem that I'm certainly finding is, and it's been talked about on the podcast before, which is just like dealing with an intern, you have this issue of being handed back what appears to be high quality work. And I'm talking really here about generative tools, but I think it's true of, if you think about the principles involved even in an agentic workflow, they're basically the same, which is you've got a tool that has synthesized a response, an outcome, an insight, an action, call it what you will, from a set of data that has been presented to it. It looks to the untrained eye as though it's accurate and actionable, but it's wrong, right?
Right.
In the same way as a manager, you've like the interns come back and the work looks college grade. It looks like something I'd expect from someone from Harvard. Because I know my business really well, I can see it's flawed. It's actually drawn the wrong conclusion from the right data or the right conclusion from the wrong data, but it's basically broken. Put differently, everyone's now become a manager.
Yeah.
Right. And I guess the question is the workforce ready for that?
We call it the trust chasm, and whether or not you're ready to cross it and trust those things. I got a phone call a couple months ago from a buddy of mine who actually says, I'm using AI in my job every day. Does this work? And I was like, this is a funny question. It is. There's a common sense element here. And I said to this person, if you use AI to analyze a spreadsheet and produce a PowerPoint, and you send that PowerPoint to your boss, that's your work. The boss says this is wrong. Okay. You don't get to say, oh, AI did it. Okay, well, that's your work product. You're the one that used the AI to produce it and send it to somebody else. So you need to make damn sure when you're sending these things out that this is of high quality and you have interrogated it. Now, what I would say on the technology side is I go back to context. Did you just all of a sudden decide one day you're going to use AI to solve this problem? Or did you sit down and give the AI enough context to explain how the pieces work together, and really spent time on, when I say new sales, I mean order, or something to this effect. Now, knowledge graphs go a long way to solving a lot of these problems, but knowledge graphs pretty advanced topic for a lot of your everyday business, but also very, very meaningful. A lot of organizations cannot produce a knowledge graph. There's technology out there to help you with it, but obviously you would need to know what that is first. But I think that as far as that, hey, I spent 5 minutes on this and then sent it to my board of directors, there's your common sense, right? Did you think through this? Because you spent 5 minutes on it, the data is wacky, and you didn't even bother to check it. That's on the human.
Yeah, and look, I think, if I was to trace it back to probably, primacy is something that is important. We've sort of been taught, and up until now, it's been true that effectively the computer is mechanical and accurate. You jump on your calculator, you don't put in 2 + 2, and the answer says carrot, right? The answer is always the same thing. It's deterministic, and I suppose people have kind of become conditioned to the idea that if the computer said it, it must be true. And I think taking that mindset of it's another intern. Right, you would no more send a report that an intern generated to the board than you would a piece of agentic software. But I suppose the other point I'm making is you can't also not know. If anything, it increases the reliance on you knowing your business and having sympathy.
Yes.
For what to expect.
If you are working on a problem that is not a good application of AI, and you don't actually understand what a good application of AI is, you're going to get a result that is not good. You're asking it to understand the feelings of my boss by reading his emails. That's not a great application. It only has the small context. I don't know, has he spoken to you when you pass by him in the office? Questions like this. And so, if you're going to put all your eggs in the AI basket, you're going to end up with some broken eggs. Yeah. And, the only person to blame is yourself.
Yeah.
And I've had that question from, some high level executives of, do you trust this? Well, yes, for things it can help me with, but if I'm trying to do something that it's not good at, then why am I even using that tool? Going back to your hammer and nail analogy, of course.
We're now at the point where we've got some green shoots. Things are starting to work. Talk to me about scaling. I suppose we talked a little bit about measuring usage. Are there any other things we need to think about at scale? And I guess I'm leading the witness towards your cybersecurity background, things like governance, controls. What should I be thinking about as we scale up?
If I go back to that revolution of security, what I always advise people is, back then, what is your approach on a person-by-person standpoint, a role-by-role in your organization on security? Even down to how much are you spending on security per employee? And it was always an interesting challenge, because then it started to understand, well, what security does every person have? And so if you translate that to AI, okay, what tools are in use? What AI tools and agents are in use for what role in your company? Well, these people are all on a help desk. They have a help desk agent. I can see the cost. I have line of sight to what that is and what function it provides. Great. How am I securing that function right there of that AI tool? It's like, well, it's encapsulated in our ServiceNow platform. Great. What's your ServiceNow security approach? How does ServiceNow secure AI? And then go right down on the line. Well, we're a big Copilot shop. Everybody has Copilot. Great. What are your security controls around that? Now, where I'd say that the security industry is catching up is tools that can help protect things like Claude Desktop, Claude Cowork, and Claude Code. And there are some providers that are coming from there. But again, when we're talking about security, we're going back to things we already understand. Defense in depth, right? Security layers to protect us from a variety of security vectors. The old back of the napkin risk analysis. Mm-hmm. What happens if this Copilot agent gets out of control or somebody compromises it? And again, so, obviously super advanced technology. We do know how to handle these things if we just take a step back and go back to, well, how would we secure anything else that was new in our environment? There's a lot more Docker instances, I think, running across the technologies landscape than there ever were before. And that's a challenge, but it's got network connectivity. It's got identity needs. You just go right down on the list. It's really no different than I've decided to move my database server into the cloud. Okay, it's a change. How am I going to secure that change? And frankly, you can have AI help you with some of that planning. That's why I think sometimes, we sort of get lost in all this hype and what am I going to do? What would you do if it weren't the letters AI? Right? You can usually answer that question.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. All right. Well, I've reached the point now where we're thinking about governance and security, certainly, at least. What does, I suppose, sustainability look like for this sort of initiative? In other words, what, if anything, fundamentally changes about the way I manage both my business stack, my people stack, my process stack, my technology stack?
Yep.
Is there anything about this technology? And look, we're obviously early enough in it that I'm probably asking you here to probably more pontificate or imagine a future. What do you think might change about how the cadence of running business in this new world?
If you look around, there are a lot of people who are, you can have a startup and the whole startup is built on AI, whether AI is their business or not, right? The first 2 employees were agents, that kind of thing. I talked to an AI startup a couple months ago. They have 40 people. They believe they can be a $4 billion company with 40 people. So, okay, that's really cool if you're starting a business today, but started the business 20 years ago. What am I doing today? So, what I would say that we're going to start doing eventually as we get this education out amongst our people and we're building these department agents, we then start to ask ourselves, where have we not applied this technology? And if I were a startup and didn't want to hire all these people, where would I go and selectively put that AI in? And we're all going to look like AI businesses that were, a startup a year ago very soon because it's just going to get easier, right? Like, and I say like, oh, well, perhaps people look at maybe, trying to be careful with this, those that are lower on the org chart. Okay, well, even those people that are doing some task that seems menial, they can still leverage AI in a certain way. Like, we're not going to be dismissive of any task or any role. The example was given to me about a warehouse supervisor. Well, they're supervising the warehouse and they're in the warehouse watching everybody. They can't really use AI, or maybe they don't need it. Well, don't they manage a schedule, right? Like, AI can help them. And so I think that's where we're going to be. It almost seems like right now we're only focused on our most core workflows. And in a year or two, it'll just be in every workflow and maybe some cases take it over. But there won't be any business process where AI is not involved.
So I want to make sure I play this back to you to see if I understood it, because the lesson I'm taking away from this, and two things can be true at the same time, is as much as you're working on it in the kind of BAU augmentation sense, there's nothing wrong with getting a tiger team off to the sides, sort of Steve Jobs, Macintosh style, and just going, run up the pirate flag and let's imagine we were a competitor entering our space for the first time, clean sheet of paper. What could you do to restart this business from scratch?
Well, and I think if you were to ask your organization that question before this AI revolution, well, geez, it would take us 6 months to build this other tool to do. You'd find a bunch of reasons they're going to take a long time. And all that dev time, all that, well, this is too hard and I don't understand how to do that, that's now shrunk. Something that took 6 months is going to take you 6 days. Mm-hmm. So now you're going to go bite off those things that you thought were hard before once you understand how AI works and how to leverage it. And so, the next year or so, I think people are going to spend a lot of time, like, let me get the big things nailed down. Right? My core processes, the thing that differentiates me, the things that makes me special. And then once I get that, I'll have learned so many lessons that now I'm just going to put it everywhere as if I were an AI startup.
Love it. Been an absolutely brilliant conversation. Had an absolute ball. Where can people go to learn more?
ThriveNextGen.com. There's plenty of links off of there. Also, LinkedIn. We have a tremendous amount of content on LinkedIn. We have the best marketing team in the biz, we like to say. So I'm sure they're going to appreciate that shout out. But obviously we're on all the other social media platforms. But I would say this podcast is another good place.
Brilliant stuff. Michael Gray, Chief Technology Officer at Thrive. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right, well, that's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen. If you've got any questions or comments about today's episode, we love to hear from you. So drop a line into the comment section. You can hit us up also on LinkedIn. Use the handle at Cloudera with your thoughts. Tremendous array of guests coming up. The producers have just got a fabulous lineup. So if you have enjoyed today's episode, and I'm sure, well, I'd hope you have, do make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you and your colleagues don't miss another drop. Thanks again to Cloudera for hosting another episode of the pod. Thanks again for listening in. We'll see you all next week.